Okay, well, welcome to the latest episode of the From the Horse's Mouth podcast. I'm your host, Fersht, and with me today is a man who doesn't need too much introduction, Tiger Tyagarajan, who I'm going to get to introduce himself because he's got an incredible career, and I'd love him to explain in his own words what he's achieved and what he's doing today. Over to you, Tiger.
Yeah, I think the latter is easier. What I've achieved, I'd leave it to others to decide that. I was the CEO of Genpact until February of 2024. Was basically in the company when we were part of GE in the late 90s, and then became the CEO in 2011, 13 years as a CEO, and then retired. So, Phil, you and I go back to the first few days of becoming an independent company in 2005, when you and I got together on one phone call in those days. And I ended the call saying, there's one person in the world who understands our kind of a business. And then since February of 2024, post my stepping down as a CEO and handing over to BK, I've taken on what I call a portfolio of stuff. I hate the word retirement. So I'm a senior advisor to BCG, kind of gives me the front row seat in some of the transformation agendas that everyone is driving across the globe in large enterprises. And then I'm a senior advisor to Bain Capital. That gets me into the investor side of the house. And then Brighton Park Capital. This is the old Mark Jaga from General Atlantic. And then Evolved Capital, which is a smaller home office of Mark Nunnally, ex-Bain Capital. And then InnoSpark Capital, which is a venture capital fund. So I'm a senior advisor to a bunch of them. And through them, I'm on a bunch of private boards, tech services in France, Spain, and Portugal, data analytics in New York and Bangalore, health tech company in Boston. And then I'm on the board of one public company, which is Jabil. And then I'm an advisor. I'm on your advisory board, which I thought was a pretty cool thing you pulled together with some really amazing luminaries. So delighted to have got invited to the board, and I am delighted to be part of that board.
Thank you very much, Tiger. Pleasure to have you. It was great catching up with you as well in New York recently and hearing some of your emerging views, which have shaped a lot since you've moved on from Genpact. And from those of you who might not be too familiar with Tiger, when Genpact was originally called Jekis and it was spun out of GE as a big F&A supply chain provider, Tiger and his team around him kind of invented the first big virtual captive model originally, the first big thinking around how to offshore process. What's fascinating today is the number one issue that is compounding companies' journeys towards AI has been fragmented, broken process. And the process debt we see as the number one impediment that needs to be evaporated for companies to be successful. So it's been fantastic watching the Genpact journey throughout the years, and then its continuation after your time as well. I think BK's done a fantastic job taking it forward. So let's get on to where we are today as an industry, Tiger. How would you describe 2025 and what you've experienced, and maybe think a little bit about what we can expect to see happening next year?
I think one interesting way to describe 2025, by the way, it's the first time I'm answering that question. No one has asked me specifically. Now that we're coming close to the end of 25, only 15 days left. What will one look back in January and look at 2025 as? And I'm just speaking straight off the cuff here. I think 2025 is going to be the beginning of a bifurcation between the winners and the losers. And I'm actually going one level higher in every industry. Because in every industry, I believe there are going to be firms that are going to embrace all these new technologies, even though it's not all done and dusted. It's not very clear exactly what's going to work. But the fact is that a number of these technologies have to be leveraged, all this AI, GenAI, predictive AI, etc. And two, they have to address process debt, data debt, all of those debts, and drive change in the organization, which we know is actually the single biggest challenge. Those who manage to do all of those things are going to thrive in this pretty significantly different changing world with AI. And those who don't, I think unlike all other technology changes in the past, they're going to suffer badly. And that's going to happen in our industry. I think in our industry, there's going to be real winners and there's going to be some real losers. As compared to, I think in the past, many waves, there have been people who've said, hey, I'll jump onto the cloud a little later. I don't want to do it right now. I'll be a fast follower. I'm really scared of those companies who say, I'm going to be a fast follower on AI. I can leverage it later. Well, your competitor has leveraged it and has become super intelligent. You've missed the boat. That's it. You can't. There's no such thing as leapfrogging in AI. It's much more difficult.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's like some of the jobs that are being eliminated today, they're not being recreated. Some of these, they're gone forever, right? And we are witnessing a game changer that is putting, I think, people on their tenterhooks. We've seen people develop their own personal capabilities in AI actually quite impressively in the last year in particular. It's become part of everyone's lives now.
Yeah.
And then we go to work and it's a different bag when it comes to how enterprises are adopting it. So, but I do buy what you're saying around you got big winners and big losers coming. America's made a huge bet on AI. We have, I think, President Trump is trying to deregulate AI as much as possible through federal execution, federal executive order as well. So we are going into uncharted territory, right? As we start to see what's happening and advising companies like BCG, who's, I think, the highest growth of the consulting firms in 2025. What do you see them doing?
I'm not that different, Phil, from, for example, what you and your team are doing. When I was at your conference, I was really pleasantly surprised and delighted to see some of the work that your team was doing. Your invention of the phrase that is now becoming kind of lingua franca, everyone is using it, service as software. I just came back from a trip to the Middle East. I got back yesterday evening, and it's my first trip to Dubai in 16 years. The reason I was there and I decided to go when I got an invitation, whereas in the past I've declined invitations, was because I think the Middle East is moving and is changing. And I saw your announcement in HFS opening up the Middle East office, and I said, makes sense. The conversation there that I had at some forums were all around how can an economy like the UAE or Saudi Arabia grab all of this and leapfrog when actually they are behind on a bunch of other things. And the answer is they can, but they are jumping now. And I was delighted to see government, oil companies, banking, insurance, infrastructure companies, data center, the amount of investment that's going into AI. And I think that's going to happen in many businesses, and it's going to happen in many economies. And you talked about the US and Trump. Similarly, there are other economies that are grabbing, and there are others who are not. And those are going to suffer.
Yeah, and the speed of change is phenomenal. Like, it's interesting where I think a few months ago, India was America's enemy, and now they're trying to be friends again. And then Modi's turning around and saying, well, hang on a sec, we're growing at 8%. I'm going to pick and choose who I want to work with now. So wait in turn, guys. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right about the globalized nature of AI. Even though, in a weird way, we've gone away from globalism, in some ways, it's opening up opportunities for many regions. And for a company like HFS, we're fairly small, but we compete with giants like Gartner and co. We can do it because clients no longer care about boots on the ground. They care about how much you impact, how much you advise, how much you influence, and can you connect people.
I'm smiling, Phil, because your statement, you are small and you're competing with giants, reminds me of the way we always felt, I always felt, and my team always felt about our position in the industry coming out in those days and competing with the giants of the industry. And we actually said, we like the fact that we are small and nimble and agile, and we're so close to the client, and we know their stuff, we know their inside, and we fall in love with them, which is kind of what you have tended to do. And I think that was the hallmark of our journey and success, competing with really great large firms. But when you're that large and you have 50-year history, things happen to you.
Yeah. But the nature of these engagements is changing so dramatically. It's almost playing into a whole different type of provider as we're going
Yeah,
down that path. I'm seeing sort of BPO, BPM, whatever you want to call it, these deals. I've seen some clients wanting to take up to 80% headcount removal on an engagement now.
yeah,
I saw one deal which is going from 6,000 to 1,000 over 3 years, all because of agentic.
yeah.
And my take is, how the hell are you going to do it without destroying the culture in your company, creating panic? And I started to think back to the 90s when we did the first sort of complicated kind of shared service transition deals, PwC, Anderson Consulting.
Right.
And it was almost like, we used to call it your mess for less, but it was
Yeah,
almost like, take this stuff and you go figure it out. And so are we facing something similar to that again? And is it going to shift back to advantage to the smart service provider winners who can do this for clients? Or is something else going to happen?
no, I think it is going to, as I said, it's a seminal moment of separation. Rising tide lifts everyone, world is finished. Now it's a question of, can you grab this? And what is most interesting, Phil, is that if you ask me what will determine success, and if I were to think about the characteristics of a firm and of an individual who will be more successful in this journey over the next 2 to 3 years, I would put my finger on one word, which is culture. A culture of adaptability, a culture of fearlessness, a culture of experimentation, a culture of putting the client first, come what may, a culture of having the guts to cannibalize yourself. I mean, those cultural traits in a team and in a business, I think are going to make a huge difference. Do you have the technical skills? Of course, it's important, but you'll get it. You'll attract the people if you actually have that culture because you'll start winning and then you can attract the people. And one of the most interesting things about this journey, and I'd love to get your reaction, is that unlike the Your Mess for Less journey, this one, the iterative nature of, you know, implement this technology, get some benefit, then implement, keep improving, and do that in cycles of 60 days, 90 days, and you compound at the rate of, let's say, 4 5% every time, you can get to the answer pretty quickly. Versus in the past, some of those journeys were over the next 3 to 5 years, we will get there. Who the hell knows where people are in 3 to 5 years? People have forgotten, leaders have changed, the mess remains. It's not anymore the same. And then the leader comes and says, but I want something else. So this journey seems faster and more iterative. And I actually, therefore, have more optimism in those who grab it to be more successful.
Yeah, no, it's it's about the nature of work changing,
Yeah.
and the conversation has to shift. Because if you have 5,000 employees, you reduce to 1,000 employees, whatever, you're not going to then pay for 4,000 agents
No.
on an FTE model. Your business has been replaced by a lot of software to do what was needed before in a much more automated,
Yeah.
personalized, predictive approach. And then the people who remain are the ones who can apply more context and intelligence and
Yeah.
customer facing capability, blah, blah, blah. But um, it's a big change. And I do think it's going to be driven by clients who are just going to work and say, look, we don't need this many people to operate. We need to be more nimble. We need to be operating at a different volume. And this is where I think the smart providers are going to come into play with, we can help you do this. This is how we're going to have to invest in you. We're going to have to build out agentic systems, figure out, are we going to run this on Amazon or Microsoft or
Yeah.
Google? What platforms are we going to use? And then we're going to phase the approach. We're seeing some start to do that, but it's not your usual suspects. I'm actually starting to see emerging firms who might be 500 million in size. They're willing to take on these deals at lower cost. They can afford to be the risky ones. And
Yeah.
it's the great big quarterly Wall Street's enslaved incumbents who are really struggling. Like, how do we keep the current business clunking along at 3-4% and then build out that disruptive model at the
Yeah.
same time?
Yeah.
Another thing that's happening, Tiger, which is really interesting is in the US, the services industry is becoming a bit of a dirty word. It's getting a little like telecom 20 years ago, where investors don't like it, margins are too small, the growth is not big enough to get them excited. So we're starting to see some of the service providers build software businesses. So I think HCL has $2 billion of software that they've spun out. I think very smart. They bought Domino and a whole bunch of stuff. Um, I think Cognizant have about $2.5 billion worth of software. They're probably going to platformize that out as well. Those software businesses are going to be worth more than the services businesses in probably a couple of years. And this is where we're starting to see the shifts happening and happening fairly quickly.
Yeah, and actually, apart from the fact that those software businesses incubated inside or acquired and then grown inside, the way I approach that also is when you have that capability inside, it allows you to then use that capability to the other 80% of the business so that you can agentify a whole bunch of things that you're doing for your clients. It requires guts, as I said, because you have to stand up and say to a client that we have a $40 million relationship on some topic. I'm going to take you down the path of agentification. I need your help in ABC, and here's what I'm going to do. At the end of that journey, you and I are both going to forget the number of people that are there because it's going to be dramatically lower. Your bill will no longer be 40 million. It'll probably be 25 million, right? I am going to make more margin, guaranteed, right? But my revenue is going to go down. Now, I need to have the confidence and the guts to make three assumptions, apart from the fact that I'll be able to execute. Assumption number one is if I can execute, then I'll make more margin. Assumption number two is when 40 becomes 25, I'm going to be able to convince you to give me another 40. And assumption number three is that I'm going to take that use case and apply it to 20 other people. And I'm going to take new markets that have not yet been captured or take away share from others who are not as gutsy as I am. End of story, winners and losers separated. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And it's changing the nature of roles themselves, which I'd love to get onto next as you're a father and you worry about the futures of your kids as they grow up and what they're going to do. And it's almost like there's a profession shift happening, there's a job shift happening. One thing that started to get me interested is I looked at all the OpenAI jobs, and there was another company as well doing this. I don't forget for a second, but there's about tons of OpenAI people who just call themselves go-to-market, right?
Yeah.
They just know this go-to-market, and they're calling you up and they're saying, "Hey," and they're basically mixing marketing, influence, and sales and customer service into one role now. And it's interesting to see the AI companies are sort of taking the lead with creating these types of roles. Anthropic's another one doing something similar. Like they're creating different types of positions for the young people now.
Yeah, and actually, Phil, that further reinforces the fact that you and I will find it very difficult, and I think the world finds it very difficult to predict what kind of new jobs are going to get created. I'm a fundamental believer that new jobs will get created. And one of the interesting views I have is that those new jobs, and I've had this view for quite some time, those new jobs are not necessarily the jobs which require deep AI skills. I'm not asking you to write the next GPT and large language model breakthrough. No, I want you to be very comfortable using them. I want you to be very comfortable in figuring out how to use them to build solutions. Most importantly, I actually want you to understand your problem, the client's problem, the business situation, understand how the economics work. How does customer delight work? How do people actually adopt all this new stuff? You might be excited, but are you going to get 100 other people excited to adopt them? Because however glitzy a toy is, if others don't adopt it, it's not going to work. How are you going to convince them to adopt it? Or is it going to be viral? Because if it's viral, you don't need to do much. It'll just spread. I think some of those skills, interestingly, are social skills, are liberal arts skills, are, do you understand how people interact with each other, how they communicate with each other? How do you drive change? What are motivations? What is empathy? The importance of that is going to rise because technology is going to be available to everyone. So everyone is going to kind of get the same answer. I actually don't care if it's OpenAI or Claude or whatever. One is 98%, the other is 99%. Someone else will become a 98% the next day or 100% the next day. It'll keep moving. But all these other human skills are going to become more scarce. So if someone comes and asks me, what do you think I should do as I go through college? My reaction is, you can be a deep AI researcher. That's possible. I think there'll still be enough to do there if you're that kind, made that way. But you don't need to. As long as you're comfortable with AI and you use it and you know how to use it and you keep up to speed with all these new things, you actually spend time on liberal arts. And my view is that those are going to be amazing jobs. One of the other things in terms of experiments, and you would love to hear this, I'm involved in an experiment that I got pulled into where a reasonably large enterprise that has, pick a number, 10,000 people, with middle level managers managing teams of 10, 20 people in two layers. And the question that is being, or the study that is being done, it's already been done, is exactly how much time in terms of minutes do they spend doing what, the managers. Having done that study, the conclusion that has been reached is 52% of all the work that is done by those people, which is consolidate all the meetings that I have, set up the agenda for the meeting, synthesize the meeting, create action plan, follow up, do reviews. All of that can now be done by GenAI tools. One of the experiments is, can I have 100 listening tools that is listening to 100 meetings a day in the company? Within a month, I have all the meeting data available for 3,000 meetings in the company. And I can extract whatever insights I want from that. Another company is actually taking all the information available in the 100,000 calls they're doing every day and using that to train people the next day morning. So think about training cycles collapsing and everyone becoming better every day. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a whole different shift to leadership in these businesses, and we talk about people debt, process debt, data debt, etc.
Yep.
The one debt that I think is very important within the people area is leadership. And I've had a look at leadership traits, and they haven't changed. If anything, what's happening now is they're becoming more important, like the ability to listen, the ability to create psychological safety amongst your staff. So how do you create a safe space where everyone can experiment together and say, we're using AI, so let's stop doing this individually and start to work as a team and sharing what we're doing. It's like I was telling my research team the other day, I worry that the first collaborator you go to now is ChatGPT. You need to turn to your fellow analysts to collaborate. And then once you've come up with some really good ideas, then you can go to ChatGPT to see if it has some other context to add and maybe synthesize it a bit better. I think driving the human collaboration with AI as the augmenter is the way to go. What you don't want is everyone just going off, becoming completely addicted to whatever AI tool they're using and working in a silo. And I think that's where companies need to really figure this out, is listen, help everybody learn together, create a safe environment, be a great communicator and a great motivator for your team. And that's where I think we go as a business. And that's when jobs get created, because people want to work in those environments. And this technology is just making us great at what we do.
Actually, Phil, you just teased out a very interesting, nuanced point there, which is one path that people can take in this world of AI and GPTs is go deeper down the rabbit hole of, I am going to put my head down and bury myself there and keep doing that. The other path you can take is, hey, I now have access to all these machines that will help me. So it actually has given me 40% more time to spend time with people and talk to them and get into their brain and head. What do they think? Each of you are buried in your rabbit hole for some time, and then you come out and then talk to each other. And you might come up with very interesting exploratory ideas. This whole notion of AI exploits, the human explores, and the combination of explore and exploit has been the human journey for whatever, 200,000 years and human civilization. Without exploration, exploitation dies in the end because there's only so much you can exploit.
That's right.
Exploration is needed to go to new territory that no one has ever gone. AI can't do that.
That's right. So, what do you think about? I'll use the latest one. McKinsey announcing they're going to lay off something like 10% of their staff because of AI. Do you buy that?
Look, I'm a senior advisor to BCG, so one part of me says, they're not growing as much, right? Who knows? I don't know. Two, they're a great firm. Three is, they're doing what everyone should do, which is constantly lean out, right? And if you're leaning out today, why wouldn't you say exactly what they said? Who cares whether that's the real reason or not? You have to say, which is, I'm now bringing in AI and I'm going to lean my team out. Look, everyone went through a curve in the pandemic of hiring too many. All kinds of businesses did that. Amazon did that. McKinsey did that. BCG, everyone did that. Then they started plateauing, and then now they are shedding. Is that finished? It should have by now, but maybe in some cases it hasn't. And maybe this is the remnants of that. Maybe AI is beginning to have, quote unquote, an impact. But if I were the smart leaders in these firms, I would get ahead of that and say, I'm actually going to lean out and I'm going to bring AI and we'll see how to make it work. Because if I wait for it to work fully, it'll take too long. So I'm actually going to lean first and then bring the tools in.
That's right. And it's almost like they should say, look, we're too big. We need to reduce size a little bit. And then we can also explore AI so we feel we can operate even more brilliantly.
Think about client conversations. If McKinsey was, serving me as a client, the next day morning when I meet the partner who's serving me, I'm going to say, hey, John, you announced this thing. What are you doing? I want to know what you're doing because I want some of that myself.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool marketing, right?
Well, I mean, I thought the Amazon one was best, where they literally said that we're going to not hire anybody for the next 5 years and double our revenues and become twice as profitable, and then the street. But that was a better way of looking at it. Whereas what's happening with McKinsey, we'll pick on them for the time being, is they're driving fear into the workplace to make everybody scared of AI. And all I'm hearing right now is America doesn't like AI because they think it's a job taker. And next year, you've got these midterms coming up. I think it's going to become very political rather than practical, a situation on people investing in AI to cut jobs. And I think the two being aligned together is not where we want to go with this. And I actually think that the way this is going to play out longer term is some of these Fortune 2000 mega companies are going to get smaller. A lot of them are going to get smaller. They're not going to need as many people. You're just not going to need as many people. But you're going to get a lot of small to medium businesses proliferate. There's going to be tons more of them. It's already happening in our own industry. Like I see it all the time. Small tech, small services. I was meeting with a $100 million firm today who's doing amazing things with a company because they're big enough already to do agentic work with their clients. And most people, I think, are going to want to work for smaller companies.
Yeah. It's also one of the two other interesting things that happened. It happened in the case of consumer goods some years ago when I was in Unilever in the first job in my career from 1985 to 1992. It was very clear to me that the strength of a P&G or a Unilever or a Colgate-Palmolive, the big brands, was the fact that their brand name was very well known, the fact that they had sales and distribution down to the little village in 185 countries in the world. That was their strength. And then I said, therefore, it's very difficult for anyone to start a new product in a shampoo or a chocolate or whatever. Come Amazon and a bunch of other things, and that has changed. In the last 10 years, the number of people who woke up one morning and said, I want to launch a new tea cracker business or a chocolate business. And I will have two people in my team. I'm the brain and two people. I'm going to have a bunch of advisors advising me on nutrition and sustainability and so on. I'm going to get a marketing advisor, the best in the world, to spend 10% of her time with me or his time with me. I'm going to sign up with Amazon for distribution. I'm going to do social media, digital marketing, and I'm going to do contract manufacturing with the best manufacturing plants in the world. Everything is no capex, capital light, and pay by the drink. And my product gets made in Ohio, and a month later, someone in New Zealand is buying it. Literally. I mean, this is a true story, by the way, a friend of mine. That has now become reality for the last 10 years because of what Amazon and digital marketing and all of those things have done. I think the same thing is going to happen with other firms, where it is possible for one of our kids to actually stand up and say, tomorrow morning, I'm launching my own company. I don't need a finance team. I don't need a procurement. I don't need anything. I can buy everything on a pay-by-drink basis to put my idea together. And that's it. And my team will be, in some number of years, $100 million revenue, and will be 5 people. That's it.
I do think if smart universities get their act together, teaching entrepreneurship is real entrepreneurship, which is what you described.
Yeah.
I became an entrepreneur, but only because I fell into it. It wasn't because I, really wanted to be one. I just became one. But it's a great thing to be and a skill to have and an independence. And I see more and more of this happening all the time. And, I think we're figuring it out. I really do. I think I've never seen people get so hands-on. When we do our roundtables with our clients, you can tell most of them are actually getting their hands dirty for the first time in years. They've stopped talking. They've started acting. Actions are happening. And we see 2026 as the year of how to, not the year of why and what.
Yeah. That, by the way, that's another great leadership quality to have, which is all the battles are going to be fought in the last mile. The large language model base foundation is available. The basic tools on top of that are going to be available. The problem is always going to be the last mile. The last mile is where the process is crap, the data is corrupted, the people are not ready to change. That's where all the problems are, and that's where all the value is. So to solve the last mile problem, leaders must spend time in the last mile. If I was, and I've heard Doug McMillan at Walmart talk about this, he spends time in the store. I used to spend time in operations consistently, meaning material time. I used to go spend time with the team saying, what are you doing? Show me what you're doing, because I want to understand it. Because then I can think as to what else can we do. Those who understand the last mile as leaders are going to have real credibility. And 2, they'll be able to know how to use these tools in my last mile, because I know my last mile now. Otherwise, they are sitting up in the ivory tower and they don't know anything.
Yeah. So I'm sure we know a few of them.
We won't name them here.
we won't name them here. Maybe next time. Tiger, I think it's been always great catching up with you, always refreshing and great to meander around some top subjects of the day. And I look forward to catching up in 2026.
Thanks for tuning in to From the Horse's Mouth, Intrepid Conversations with Phil Fersht. Remember to follow Phil on LinkedIn and subscribe and like on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite platform for no-nonsense takes on the intricate dance between technology, business, and ideological systems. Got something to add to the discussion? Let's have it. Drop us a line at fromthehorsesmouth@hfsresearch.com or connect with Phil on LinkedIn.